It's October, and yet my shelf looks so empty. Ah! Just a sec. Ah, that's much better. Now, the reason for the spookiness is we have another book haul today, and a lot of the things that I found today, and from a couple other book hauls that I've done over the past couple of weeks, have been quite spooky. Now, not everything's going to be spooky, but naturally, we're going to start off with the spookiness, because it is, of course, Halloween month, the month of Halloween. So first off, we've got some Goosebumps, The Beast from the East, and let me just get the camera in focus. Just a moment. There we are. Want you to see those nice ribs on the Goosebumps logo, which they stopped doing in recent publications, and that makes me pretty sad because that's something that I always enjoyed as a kid. But yes, The Beast from the East, something, a copy that I did not have in my collection. Always fun to find Goosebumps books. Of course, Beast from the East is one of many classic tales from R.L. Stine, along with this happy fellow here, The Horror at Camp Jelly Jam. Now, it says here, free decal of doom. Unfortunately, mine does not have the decal in it, which is sad, but, it doesn't stop me from grabbing the book if I don't have a copy of it already. Number 33. Yeah. How'd you like to wake up to that face? I wouldn't. And then on the more recent note of Goosebumps, we have Goosebumps Horrorland, the horror at Chiller House. Yeah, these, I like Goosebumps in all of its forms. Of course, the older ones have a bit more of an aesthetic appeal that I like, but there's something to be said about these newer iterations, and I'm happy that they're still being made and that kids are growing up with them to this day. Moving on from there, we have Super Eye Adventure, the Prehistoric Island. Now, this one's not inherently spooky, but, those beasts and that gentleman there don't look very friendly at all. Now, this one, I believe, is supposed to come with some sort of seeing eye 3D glasses type thing, because it has all of these pages where presumably you would use some sort of seeing glass thing to see some secret images there. Well, editing this in with my phone because I'm dumb. Looking at this, it says 3D stereograms, and I know exactly what those are. It's just like the old Magic Eye books. So what you would do is you'd hold the page like this, and then in your vision, you'd line up those two dots on the top, and I'll see if I can hold the page so that you can get just the gist of the effect. But you'd line up those two dots on the top, holding the page like this, and it will give you a secret 3D image. And yeah, I love those books. I actually have quite a few of them right up here on the shelf. So my apologies for being a dum-dum and not realizing what this book was about. Okay, back to the thing. Like the Super Eye book, we have another Choose Your Own Adventure, or in this case, Choose Your Own Nightmare, for Night of the Werewolf. I really like the cover art on this, which of course always drags me in. The cover art gets me every time. First it's the binding, you see that on the shelf, and then it's the cover art, which just puts a smile on my face usually when I see it. As for the insides, it does have some illustrations. You'd expect no less. Let's see if we can find another one. Oop, I think there's one right here. Can I get it? There we go. Ooh, look at that there. So yeah, it's another Choose Your Own Adventure book, but it's sort of spooky themed, and that I like quite a lot. A little different, a Casper Jr. novelization paperback book that I just happened to find. Always looking for paperback versions of movies, especially when they come with full color, not illustrations, but photos from the book, or from the movie, rather. If you haven't seen Casper, definitely give it a watch. It's a bit cheesy sometimes, but it's really fun, and if you have any younger kids, it's not too scary. just the right amount of scary for your Halloween month nighttime movie viewings. And then the last of the paperbacks I have is Scary Stories for Stormy Nights. Now, it has this giant crease in it, which is unfortunate, but I couldn't pass it up because it's a big back, paperback version, sort of like the old Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Not only in size, but also in content, because that's sort of a similar title there. And yes, it's just a compilation with some illustrations of different spooky stories from around the world, I think. The Good Deed. Now, I haven't read any of these. Eventually, I suppose I probably will. I'm trying to find another illustration. Oh, there's one. But yeah, I'm sure this would give you quite the spook in a proper reading scenario with the lights dimmed and mayhaps a campfire around, something like that. But yeah, always happy to find these types of paperback books and steadily growing my collection of them over time. Moving on from there, we have the Halloween ABC book. It's a hardback book from, I believe, the 80s, 1987, as it's falling out of the page. And as you could probably imagine, this is falling apart. It's a very nice, stylized ABC book. I'm quite fond of the illustrations. It also has some nice poems in it to accompany them. I have, I think, one or two other ABC books for Halloween. For some reason, that seems to be a very popular genre of book. But this one, I think I like the most as far as the illustrations go. They're a little spooky, but not too spooky that a child wouldn't want to read them, for sure. Oh, look at that gentleman there. Jack-o'-lantern. So, yeah, always fun to find these types of books out and about. And lastly, we have this record, of all things. I do collect records from time to time. It is a Christian perspective on Halloween. Now, I don't know really anything about this whatsoever. Apparently, it's a 1-hour radio show. It's a recording of a 1-hour radio show from 1979. And it even notes here about how this gentleman who recorded this is a comedian, but you should not expect this album to be humorous, which, when I read that, I thought, okay, well, this is strange enough for me to be interested in it. So I will put in some footage here of what this sounds like on the record player. But first, let me show you the record. Let's see if it looks special. Probably not. Usually these things don't look too different from a normal record. I do like the way it's printed. Halloween there. Very stylized, very 70s, late 70s. So yeah, let's hear it, shall we?
There's a delineation between witchcraft and Satanism, basically because Satanists believe and worship Satan in one form or another, and witches do not worship Satan per se. They worship other gods. It could be Baphomet, it could be Hathor, it could be a number of deities, Diana, things like this. Witches are more or less into religions that have to do with the earth and nature and stuff. This book is probably the best book out on the market today on how to do it in witchcraft, and as you can see, it's not just a little treatise. It is a how to do it recipe book, and you can buy this anywhere. I've seen it here in town.
Well, I'm sure that was fascinating. Moving on in the Christian vein, I found these books, all of them from the same library, it seems. Let's see if we can find the stamp for the library on it. It doesn't seem to be on this one. But they're from a library in Pennsylvania, which is not too far from where I was finding these books. And they are very stylized stories from the Bible. This one is about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And yeah, I was just sort of struck by the illustrations in them. They all have their own unique style, and of course they're not all from the same time period, but they are all bound with this similar style of this brown border up here, and they all seem to come from the same place. Samson and Delilah, another one, again bound with this brown border on top and bottom. Does this one have the library inside? Here it is. The Westminster Presbyterian Church Library in Westchester, Pennsylvania. So if you're watching this from that church there, let me know if you want your books back. I'd be more than happy to return them. This one, very stylized, reds and blacks. I don't know, I just really enjoyed seeing these, and they struck me, because usually with these sorts of religious books, if you have any experience with them, you know, they're sort of, you know, they're pretty dulled down for kids. They're not very visually interesting, in my experience. Here we have the boy Jesus. The white Jesus, of course, as he was depicted back in the, you know, mid-century, mid-20th century. Let's see, can we find a date on this one? 1953. So yeah, mid-century. This one not as stylized, more traditional, but I was really struck by the cover because, well, it's white Jesus, and I just know that that's become a mainstream Christian point now to note that Jesus was probably not white because of where he grew up. So, interesting finds. Moving on, I've got just a couple others. This one is an ancient story retold by Max Bolliger. And Noah and the Rainbow is this story. And it's got that brown border at the top and bottom. Let's see if we can find a date out of curiosity. 1972. Not sure if that was legible for you, but that's what it says. Noah was a good man. He was 600 years old. Geez, can you imagine? Doesn't look very happy. So, yeah, they each have their own style, and that's something that I appreciate when I'm looking for kids' books. But to find them all together and bound in the same sort of way, I just, couldn't break up the collection. The Tower of Babel. This was the first one I found from this set when I was at the store. Pardon me. And it's got the most contrasting sort of color style. It's very vivid. I don't know if the camera really picks it up at all. But I definitely appreciate the color and variety, especially compared to the others that I found. And it tells the story of the Tower of Babel, presumably, where all the languages of the world were said to have come from, sort of to explain how we got so many different tongues in the course of our history. Sure, it's an interesting story. I'm not really familiar with it, but now I have the appropriate text in case I want to learn more about it. And the last from this series, if you want to call it that, this dumped-off collection from this church, is The Christ Child, which I was very surprised because when I opened it up, I thought, oh, okay, it's going to be from the 70s or so. And no, it's actually from 1931, which really, immediately, I knew I had to get it. And yeah, it's a very old book, and I was surprised to see it sitting in a Goodwill shelf alongside these other ones. And yeah, as far as the 1930s go, I'd say the illustration is pretty traditional. Subject matter, obviously traditional. It's an interesting book. They're all quite something that I don't really come across are religious books of this age. And I certainly really don't ever purchase them. But I made an exception here, especially for this one being, 80 years old at this point, over 80 years old. Moving on from there, I found a few older books from the 50s. This is just a golden book called Animal Friends. 29 cents. That's how you know it's coming from the olden days, like what they had the book prices being in the olden times. Apologies. So yeah, 1953. Love the illustrations in these. These are very simple stories for your kids. And makes them pretty endearing, especially when they come from certain time periods like the 50s, when kids didn't really have anything else besides the books and limited television, an incredibly limited television, if that. Yeah, it's a nice little book about some animal friends. And alongside that book, I found A Trip in Space, which is a Randy McNally book. In my experience, there are 3 types of these sort of small style books. Randy McNally is one of them, probably the lesser of the 3. Then you have Whitman books, and then you have Wonder books, which are, I think, considered to be the most sort of sought after. I definitely have the most Wonder books, though, so they're probably not as collectible in that sense. There's probably more Wonder books than anything else. If my Roman numerals are correct, that is 1958. So it's a book about going to space, which, of course, was before we went to the moon. So maybe that's what it's about. Haven't really looked through it. It's a nice, simple book about going into space. Let's see. Where did they end up? Well, they ended up in the water just over there, apparently. So, yeah, you can't really beat finding something like that for, 60 cents at the Goodwill. This is sort of an example of the book that I'm always looking for when I go out. As well as this one, which was right next to that, A Trip to the Moon. Now, this is a Wonder book, and it's in great shape, too, and 29 cents, so it's pretty old. I get excited whenever I see these types of bindings, because I just know that it's going to be something worthwhile. Yeah, they always look like this on the back, too, Wonder books, and they have these washable covers. Now, I wouldn't test that in today's... I would not test the washability of a book from over 70 years ago. But, thank you, Karen Hansen, by the way. But it's a nice selling point, I guess. Back in the day, you want to keep your books clean. 1953. And it's another book about going to space, which we eventually did do. Pardon me. Look at those spacesuits. If you need a Halloween costume idea, there's one for you right there. And these pages, they just have a certain feel to them that books that are published today don't really have at all. It's just another one of those things that I really like to find are these types of small Wonder book style books. Moving on from there, we have a Wonder Starter book, so another Wonder book, just published a bit later. This one you can see is 79 cents. I think I have 2 or 3 others in this sort of colorful series. This one I think is in the best shape of all of them. First printing, 1974. So it's about spiders and what they do. And I think how we should all treat them nicely because they are our friends. If you find a spider in your house this winter, if you live somewhere cold like I do, don't squash it immediately. If it's just up in the corner, just let it be because chances are it's probably keeping your home free from other types of insects that are actually genuinely annoying rather than ones that are just, a little misunderstood. Some would say creepy. I say misunderstood. Now, if I saw a spider that was even half this size in person, I would be afraid, so I might be speaking a bit out of my ass there, but, it's worth the sentiment. Here's a nice hardcover book, The Monkey and the Bee. I believe this is from the 60s or 70s. Let's go ahead and give that a check real quick. This is one of my later findings, 1969. It's a fun little story, I'm sure, if I had actually read it before I opened these. An interesting, or not an interesting, but a noteworthy point about these is I don't really look through these books before I look through them here on camera. I usually, usually you're getting a first impression from me. Because I buy them in the store, I look through them just a cursory glance to see if they're interesting, but I don't linger on them too much. Except for those Christian books. Those were ones that I really had to stop and look at because I was confused about what I was seeing and how old they actually were. Yeah, it's a nice little addition to the shelf you see right over here is usually where I keep these style thick books. Now I'm running out of space, which probably doesn't help that I'm buying more books, but eventually we'll have an entirely different setup. Another hard copy, thick book. The True Book of Houses. It's just a very simple book. I'm sure that at one point it came with a cover sleeve, but that's been long gone. What is that name? Demestias? I have no idea. Let's see, when is this book from? I remember this one being sort of older. Yeah, 1957. Houses, and where they are, and what they look like in different places. Houses in hot, dry lands. Sort of just look like tents, I guess. Let's skip ahead. Houses in a city. If you live in the United States, I'm sure you're quite familiar with those. Let's see. Ooh, that's a houseboat, I think. There are other kinds of boat homes. There are houseboats on the river. Oh, what's the next page? I'm curious. Now they've got me. Ooh, that's a big boat. That's like a party boat. It's even got a fancy helicopter there, I think. That's... Did helicopters look like that? Maybe. Some sort of paracopter or something like that. It's a fun little book, and yeah, like so many of these that I'm showing you, it has a library card in the back. Not stamped. This was not a popular book, unfortunately. I couldn't tell you why. It's pretty interesting to me. And the last of our hard copy old school books is All About the Planet Earth. Now this one probably deserves its own video at some point. There's my receipt. Just fall to the ground, yes. Oh, I think that name is similar to the one we just looked at. John Della Lucia? No, that's a different name. But still. What year is this book? Let's take a look. 1962. I just want to go back for a second because that's kind of awesome. You have to admit. I can't stress it enough, and you'll probably hear me say it 1,000 more times. The old style of some of these illustrations is really why I like to collect these books. You can probably tell, I don't really spend much time reading these books. I know, it's ironic because we read books, but it really is about the design and seeing how people have conveyed information in a visual form. That's what I'm really about. So when I find something like this, very stylized, similar colors, it just really scratches an itch for me that I don't know. I guess it makes me a nerd, but hey, whatever. I'm a nerd then. Look at that. Tall mountains and deep holes. If you're into graphic design, like I am, this is something that you should really be looking at, or how these old books have been published, because you can get a lot of ideas from looking at these. Alright, I think we get the gist of this one. Nice big copy of the world on the back. And with that, we move on to the last two books that I found. The first one is the glow-in-the-dark book of Dinosaur Skeletons, which I had a couple of books like this back in the day. Glowback books. They, if you're not familiar, what they have done is coated the page, or parts of the page, with this sort of material. You can sort of see it bezeled there on the with the light. And I'm gonna try to hold this up to my light real quick, and then I'm gonna turn the light off. Just a moment. We'll see if this works. All right. Oh, there we go. You can see. Pretty cool. And then you turn the light back on at the risk of flushing out the camera. And you see that, well, not in this instance, but I guess in the other ones. Let's do one more, just for the hell of it. Okay, so I'm going to hold it up to the light. You know what, let's do a different one. I'll show it to you first. These are fun books, but some of these pages are just really big. Okay, we'll go with this one. It'll probably only light up half of the page, but still, worth the show. Alright, so we'll hold it there for just a few seconds. Stick it in front of the camera. And turn off the light. Ooh. Now that's pretty neat. And I've seen some of these where the light effect, I guess, is worn off. And it's not as vibrant, or it doesn't last for very long, but this one seems to have been very lightly used. So yeah, it's a neat book, and I think it's from the 80s. Let's go ahead and check. Oh nope, 1993. I should have known by this cover. I'm not that much of an expert, but I like to think that sometimes I can guess an age by the cover of the book. But anyway, the last book I have to show today, the illustrated book of Dinosaurs, which I believe I picked up a while ago. This one has been sitting around for a while, and it hasn't made its way to my dinosaur shelf up there. But it's a nice, thick book, and it might even require me to readjust the camera. Let's do that. There we go. See if the white balance corrects itself. And yeah, it's everything you need to know about how dinosaur fossils are found, what made the fossil, and let's get to the juicy bits about the actual dinosaurs. I want a nice full-page illustration. There we go. Gentle Giants. Just really nice. Always blown away by how dinosaurs are illustrated. Which apparently is an entire field of art. If you're interested in that, I think it's like paleo illustration or something like that. And it's there are people whose entire artistic career is dedicated to showing dinosaurs in print form and illustrating them and making 3D models of them. And I don't know how you get into a career doing something like that, but anything related to dinosaurs is something that's very, very cool. And you get a lot of points in my book. I mean, look at that. If you can draw that or make that in any way, you're cool. They're cool. That's it. That's the check for being cool. Can you make a dinosaur look like that on a page? You're cool. So, yeah, with that, friends, I think we're going to call it a wrap for this video, this book haul. I do enjoy finding books, and I always enjoy showing them off. This is only the second book haul video, but I'm sure there will be many more in the near future. Well, that is it, friends. Thank you for watching. Do hope you enjoyed this book haul video. If you'd like to see any of the books in this video in depth, go ahead and let me know. I plan to do videos on some of these in the future, I'm sure. Of course, I say that with a lot of books, and there's only so little time, so if there's anything you do specifically want to see, go ahead and let me know. Feel free to give us a visit at wereedbooks.com, or follow us on Instagram at wereedbooks. Always appreciated. Leave a comment if you like to see anything else from our channel. We've got plenty of weird crap to show off, and it's Halloween month, so there's going to be one or two more spooky themed videos before we get to the 31st. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and I will see you the next time we read something together. Ta-ta, friends.